one of my favorite concepts, and that's the other thing when it comes to thinking about the divine, there's so much gender fluidity there. You've got the divine feminine, you've got the father of the universe, but you also have this amazing concept of Ardhanarishwara. So Ardhanarishwara is, Shiva on one half of the body and Parvati on the other. And the description is so beautiful, where you've got a description of her eye and the shape of her eye, and then you've got the shape and the color of his eye, and these two different beings coexist in this one body. And so they are extraordinarily beautiful, and there's so much power in this being that's created by this combination, by this both. And so and there's this entire, I think there's an entire hymn on that. I feel like I know I've danced to it and stuff, but you really get this sense of both being so synergistic and so beautiful. So there's definitely that. And then, as you and I were talking earlier, the ancient stories and scriptures are really comfortable with gender fluidity, and it's not really a thing. And I think in my research for another book I'm writing, I was reading about how homosexuality became criminalized under, I think it was the British rule, became a hanging offense for a while. And so these are things that I think we don't think about, but they're imposed on an ancient tradition that was very comfortable with all these aspects of life. And never, didn't even bat an eye many of the time, often celebrated these fluidities, these differences. So one of our favorite stories about that is the story of Arjuna, who is this hero of the Mahabharata war, of the Mahabharata epic. And he, in preparation for the war, which is how the epic ends, ascends to heaven, and his father is Indra, the king of the gods. And he finds himself in heaven, having helped the gods fight a battle. And he's sitting next to his father, Indra, on the throne, and the apsaras, the divine dancers, the celestial dancers, are performing. And one of the apsaras, they're all extraordinarily beautiful, but one of the apsaras, sees Arjuna, and she's, caught by his handsome features, and he looks like another Indra next to the god. And she dances, and she is, falling in love with him slowly in this moment. And that night she approaches Arjuna in his chambers, and she goes there kind of half clothed, and her hair loose, and she's finds herself in front of him. And Arjuna joins his hands to her, and she's this extraordinarily beautiful woman, and she's shocked that he's going to join his hands and greet her that way when she's obviously there for another reason. And so he says, welcome, mother. And she says, mother? Who are you calling mother? And Arjun says, well, you are one of my ancestors' wives. You were Bauravas's wife, and so I have to call you my mother. And she says, I don't think you understand. Us Apsaras, we Apsaras do not age, and we are free of all these constraints, this marriage business, that means nothing to me. And so I may have had a liaison with your ancestor, but I'm me now. I haven't aged a bit, and we can do this. And Arjuna is pretty firm on this, although obviously he has no problem having multiple wives, but in this case, he's firm. And so he says, I'm sorry, I can't bring myself to think of you as anything other than a mother. And Urvashi is livid. She's, she can't believe she's been insulted like this. And so she curses Arjuna, that she says, you will lose your manhood. And Arjuna at that moment is shocked, but his father Indra arrives, and Urvashi's like, I just can't believe this happened. This has never happened. I'm so insulted. And Indra says to Arjuna, this could work to your advantage, because for a lot of reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is the Pandavas, the five brothers, had one of the terms of their exile. This is a lot of backstory. Hopefully your audience is familiar or can read up on it. But they had to go to the forest for 12 years and then spend the final year of their exile in hiding. And it had to be completely incognito. And if they were discovered, they would have to do it all over again, were part of the terms. So Indra says to Arjuna, this may be a blessing for you, and you'll get a new experience, and you may enjoy it, and more importantly, you will have a way to hide your warrior personality in that year if you take this curse of yours as a blessing for that year. And so Urvashi modifies it for him, and he kind of keeps that in his pocket to use when he needs to. And fast forward to when he gets back to his brothers and his wife, to Draupadi, they enter this kingdom of in the country of Matsya, and Virat's kingdom is where they go. And each Pandava decides what he's going to do. And among them, Arjuna says, well, I have this boon. Now I'm going to take this curse as my boon now, and I am going to be transformed and transform myself into Bruhandala, the dancer. And he has, in preparation for this, before leaving heaven, he took some time to learn dance and music and all these arts from Chitrasen, who is the head of the Gandharvas, who are these celestial, musical, and artistic beings. And so we have these, this beautiful image of the supreme warrior becoming a dancer, and instead of the bowstring, he's now twanging the veena string, and instead of moving his body in martial movements, he's moving his body as a dancer. And as those of you who are both dancers and familiar with martial arts, there's often a lot of overlap there. There's a lot of strength and grace involved in both. And so I love montages in movies, so I always imagine Arjun having this amazing transformation from his probably overly macho world of just fighting into this very, very beautiful, very graceful, but also very difficult artistic world. And so he kind of develops this other side of himself, which I think it increases his strength eventually, as we'll see. So he comes to Virat's kingdom, and he's all trained and he's ready to go. And so he puts on, he is known as Savyasachin, one who can use his bow with both hands. He's ambidextrous. So both of his shoulders are scarred from the bowstring. And so he wears a blouse to cover it, which is very important because he's known for those scars. And then he walks into the kingdom, and he's definitely starting out as a man, but as he transforms himself, Arjuna is now Brihanala, and she walks into the kingdom of Virat and is welcomed by the king. But the king is kind of wondering, well, tell me about yourself. And Brihanala says, well, I am Brihanala, and I am ready to train your daughter in the fine arts, in dancing and music. And so Virat is like, well, are you sure you're not a warrior instead? And Brihanala is like, no, I'm definitely a dancer and a musician, and I'm ready to perform. And so she goes into the inner quarters of Uttara, the princess, and then is very popular among all the ladies. And she's telling stories, and she's teaching them songs and dances. And it actually ends up being, I think, I would imagine, a fun year for this hero who had not had that experience. And so we see his transformation into Brihanala as this very, very beautiful thing. And the end of that year of exile ends in this dramatic way, in which the Kauravas, who are the cousins who are trying to out the Pandavas from their exile, from their hiding, invade the city, and they ride off with the cows of the city. And it just so happens that the other Pandavas and the king himself are away fighting another battle, and it's all orchestrated. So all that's left in the palace at this point is Uttar Kumar, who is the prince. He's young; he's only like 16 or so, and he says, "Well, I would definitely take on the entire Kaurav army, but I have no charioteer. What am I going to do?" And so, Draupadi hears this, and she says, "Oh, don't worry. Brihanala is a wonderful charioteer." And Uttar Kumar is like, "I'm not taking a woman to be my charioteer." And Draupadi's like, trust me, she's great. She knows how to handle the horses. And so Brihanala comes before Uttar Kumar and is very shy and is unable to put on the armor, and so everybody has to help her. And she is now decked out in armor, and then walks toward the chariot, and then they ride out. Uttar Kumar and Brihandala ride out to chase the cows and the Kaurav army. And when Uttar Kumar is stopped in front of Brihandala, stops the chariot in front of the Kaurav army, and Uttar Kumar takes one look at these heroes arrayed in front of him, and he jumps out of the chariot and runs. He's like, I'm not, this is, I'm totally just kidding, not doing this at all. And so he's running away, and Brihandala jumps out of the chariot and she runs after Uttar Kumar. And so her braid is trailing behind her, and she's chasing after Uttar Kumar. And all the Kaurav was like, she runs a lot like Arjun. We've played tag with him. That run is Arjun's run. And there's a lot of discussion and debate, and nobody knows what to make of it. And so Uttar Kumar is finally, Arjun, catches him by the hair, or rather Brihandala catches him by the hair and then drags him back. He's like, she says, you're going to drive the chariot. I'm going to fight. Climb up that tree, pull those weapons down, and we're gonna rout this army. And so Uttar Kumar is amazed at this, that Brihandala is actually Arjun, this hero. And so Brihandala ties up her hair and then rides out into battle. And then this is one of those battles in which Brihandala by herself faces this arrayed Kaurav forces, Bhishma, Drona, Karna, Duryodhana, everyone, and soundly defeats them all. There's this entire battle, and all of them, especially Bhishma and Drona, are marveling at the grace. And it's almost like we can kind of imagine that the grace that Arjun has developed in his year as Brihandala has now informed her fighting abilities. And so you have this amazing melding of these two skills and these two sides of Arjuna. Arjuna and Brihandala kind of at their peak of beauty and strength in this moment. And so that's how he announces himself as Arjuna. He blows the shell, the conch shell, and then Arjuna, or Brihandala, is now transformed to Arjuna. And then obviously it goes from there. But I think one of my favorite stories, because again, when you read, especially in the original, there is such a sense of both aspects of Arjuna being extraordinarily powerful, being extraordinarily captivating, and being so necessary to this larger context of the story. And so you really see this continuum and the fluidity between these two. So I'm so glad that you thought of this story and that I had a chance to read it again and tell it again and share it with you. So
yeah, I feel like it was actually necessary for him to be gender fluid, even in order to be the great warrior he is.
Absolutely.
To be the great dancer, like it's the both and. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you really notice, like when you read it, like that battle that Arjuna fights as Brihandala is, I don't think she's ever that strong, even in the rest of the Mahabharata war. And it's almost like in her form as Brihandala, she routs the entire army, and then she faces all of them again as Arjuna later. And it's not the same. And it's almost it's almost to me like, now that we're talking about it, I see this kind of amazing metaphor for that acceptance of that other side strengthening this warrior. Yeah.
The mama bear phenomenon, right? Like mothers can even lift up cars if they want to save the child from that accident, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they suddenly have the strength,
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think this kind of embracing of that other side of him unlocked a whole other set of abilities and of both strength and of dexterity. Almost, he became almost more of a warrior because he had been and he had been this dancer, this singer, this artist, and those two sides you see combining in them in Brihandala, really. So I find that transformation to be so necessary, as you're saying, and so compelling.
Yeah, And even what
Yeah.
you said about the fluidity between martial arts and dance, it actually
Yeah.
reminds me of the Chinese language film Hero. And
Yes. Oh, that was a great movie.
yeah, and there's
Yes. Yeah.
total like juxtaposition between musical instruments and their martial arts throughout the
Yes.
movie all the time.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. I agree
yeah.
with you. And I think the strongest and even like, athletes here frequently will incorporate dance into their training
Mhm.
because both of those aspects do I think do make someone a better athlete and a stronger warrior, or and whatever they have to do physically, because a lot of times um you know exercise or strength becomes only one thing, and this is all to the detriment of this integrated um physical and mental ability. So
Mhm.
absolutely, I think we can all take a page from Arjun Bruhendala's story for sure.
Yeah.
Kind of develop all those sides.
Mhm. I'm glad you also mentioned how dance helps athletes because, one of the ways the gender binary is upheld is also through homophobia, right? And how, in some places in the United States, like the Midwest, if a man dances, that's seen as too gay, and then too gay actually means too feminine, which is also
Right.
a very misogynistic idea. So it's like
It
both
is.
sexist and homophobic and
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely. Yeah.
queerphobic.
Right.
And they use that to control, men as well as women, and keep that gender binary by saying, oh, men cannot dance, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And that's another thing that, when you look into the ancient stories, you have Nataraja, the first dancer,
Mhm.
is the male god Shiva. And again, Shiva's the one who's comfortable with Parvati being half of him. And again,
Right. Yeah.
there's such a sense of comfort of when you have Krishna who dances, on the snake. You have Krishna who dances Ras Leela, who dresses as Radha and switches. They're switching their garments. There's this kind of fluidity there, and I think it's really interesting to me that it is not um, perceived as anything less or anything. It just enhances, and it kind of enriches the entire art and enriches the story. And so you see that where all our gods dance, men or women, it doesn't matter. They're all
Mhm.
dancing, and they're all dancing joyfully. Sometimes they're dancing out of anger. So there's
Mhm.
a lot of self-expression there in dance, across the board, across the pantheon, I should say. So
Yeah, exactly.